All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with another episode of The Way Forward. And as we get started today, I just want to go ahead and start with the top story for today, which is O.J. Simpson has passed away. I'll watch this little short segment here, and then we're going to bring Jason on the show. And man, the discussion that we're going to have today it's one of those discussions. So let's just get this started. You guys are probably well aware of this at this point, and if you haven't, and this is breaking news to you, why are we the ones breaking news to you? But here it is.
Simpson, the former football star who was accused of killing his ex-wife and her boyfriend, has died. His family sharing the news on social media, and I'm just going to read the statement here. On April 10th, our father, Orenthal James Simpson, succumbed to his battle with cancer. This is the family's statement. He was surrounded by his children and grandchildren during this time of transition. His family asking that you please respect their wishes for privacy and grace. Simpson, a Hall of Fame running back and one of the all-time greats, and also a broadcaster and actor before he faced those murder charges in the 90s and became one of the most celebrated and watched murder trials in all of history. Simpson.
All right, that's enough of that. O.J. Simpson is our topic today. You'll want to tune in today. The comment section will be on, but this show will be pre-recorded. Sorry about that. We got things that we got to do in this world. All right.
Government officials insist that
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Erskine. Good morning, Erskine. Hello, man.
How are you today?
I'm outstanding. I'm up. I'm alive. It's good. No rain in Litchfield. So
Okay.
good stuff.
Well, today I am broadcasting live from literally 15 steps that direction is the battlefield at Gettysburg.
Mm.
And so we pre-recorded today, folks, because I am taking a little historical trip, a little historical tour in Gettysburg and just that incredible battle and what that has meant for American history. I'm kind of a history nerd like that. If you know me, you know the Civil War is kind of my soft spot in American history. And, for several reasons, not just the slavery issue, but for several reasons, I think that factors in very largely in American history. So that's where we're at today. At least that's where I'm at. Jason is in sunny Litchfield.
Mm.
And so get up there while the sun is still shining.
I had a funny conversation with Abram about you and the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh boy. I didn't see us going there.
When you brought up the Civil War, it just reminded me. This week, we were listening. I listen to old country music, so Waylon Jennings is in there. And,
just a good old boy. Never meaning no harm.
So we're watching a YouTube video of these old 80s intro to TV shows. So I was kind of like telling Abram, like, oh yeah, I know this show, I'd watch this show, whatever. And so then of course Dukes of Hazzard comes on, and there they are. There's the General Lee, doing his thing.
Bo and Luke Duke.
I said, I looked at Abram. I said, man, Erskine kind of dug this show. And Erskine just,
Erskine did. Look, I'm not disavowing it. I dug that show. It got me through a significant part of my young childhood. Daisy Duke, come on, what's going on?
Oh, goodness. Abram's face was classic. He was like, what? I'm like, yeah, man. I said, who didn't like the General Lee? I mean, aside from, the flag on the thing, it was a pretty sharp car.
I mean, car jumps,
yeah,
fast cars, evasion of law,
yeah,
boss hog, Roscoe P. Coltrane. All right. So anyway, we're here not to talk about the Dukes of Hazzard. Because people
Yeah.
have probably already
That could be a
tuned this off. They're
great
like,
show. That could be a
oh, it wouldn't be as good a show as you think.
great show.
And so, man, I will say, and I'm going to say it later on, you'll want to keep watching this because my time at Gettysburg has actually made me change something. I've learned, I've grown, I've been informed, I've been enlightened. I've changed something that I've thought for a while about Civil War monuments. Wait for it. It's coming in this show.
Okay.
But brother, can you lead us to the throne? Doctor, Reverend, Jason, Plumber.
Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to talk this morning. As every time we ask, please bless our conversation. Help us to be wise, good, to be right, to be helpful. And Lord, just help us to make much of Jesus as we help the church go forward in our culture, the kingdom of God. We ask in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, let me get these tags out of the way. If you've not already liked and subscribed this show, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like and subscribe, folks. That's how you get access to things that help you move forward in life. The reason why you're stuck is because you haven't liked and subscribed. All right, copyright and source material that's used for this. You may have already known this, but for some reason those bots online, they keep trying to get me to sign something or sign up for something, don't realize that I put this up in every episode. Fair use clause, folks. Fair use clause. All right, let's get to, Jason, the video that I have here that kind of goes through the complicated life of O.J. Simpson, since that's what people are tuning in for. And then I'll give a little bit of my take on this. It's just a few minutes long. Ooh. And I think this is going to get at some of the salient points. I don't even know. And this is the cool thing about what it is that we're doing, folks, is sometimes I know what Jason's going to say. Oftentimes, I don't know what he's going to say. And so I'm interested to hear what your take is on this overview of the complicated legacy of O.J. Simpson.
Surrounded by his children and grandchildren. It was revealed in February that Simpson was battling prostate cancer, but he refuted rumors at the time that he was in hospice care. ABC News' Rena Roy has a look back on his life.
On a third down and 21.
In the late 60s and 70s, he was considered one of the greatest
Juice.
athletes in the country. O.J. Simpson, the Juice, an All-American at USC and the Heisman Trophy winner in 1968. Simpson went to the Buffalo Bills, turning a bad team into a good one and himself into a legend. The first player ever to gain 2,000 yards in a single NFL season, a Hall of Famer.
I'll never let you guys down, man. I'll live up to the honor of being in this hall and being on your team.
With athletic ability and star quality, he became one of the first black athletes to win off the field in the lucrative endorsement game. He starred in commercials on TV and in movies.
Yeah, from Dakota.
Creating a celebrity lifestyle. But that changed in June 1994 when Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, was found brutally murdered. She'd been stabbed repeatedly and her throat was slit. Her friend Ronald Goldman was also repeatedly stabbed to death. Simpson quickly became a suspect, and after the now infamous white Bronco slow-speed chase, which was carried live on TV stations around the country, he was arrested. Charged with both murders, Simpson's 9-month murder trial was broadcast to millions.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
2 years later, sued in civil court by the parents of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the verdict went the other way. Simpson was found liable for the deaths. His assets were seized and he was ordered to pay $33.5 million in restitution to both victims' families. He never paid $1 and virtually bankrupt, Simpson's life became a decade-long encounter with the paparazzi. In 2007, Simpson was arrested after he and friends entered a Las Vegas hotel room to retrieve sports memorabilia Simpson claimed had been stolen from him. The jury disagreed.
Guilty.
Simpson was sentenced to 33 years in prison but was released on parole after 9 years. Out of the spotlight, the All-American hero and American pariah died as a disgraced but free man.
All right, Jason. O.J. Simpson. I'm going to let you take the first ready, fire, aim on this one.
Well, was it 93, 94, something like that? 94, this June 12th, I think. trying to think of where I was.
Almost 30 years.
Yeah. So that would put me somewhere close to high school. In high school,
Mhm.
7th, 8th, 9th, I don't know, 9th or 10th grade or something like that. And
Yep.
I remember the whole chase. I remember the whole trial. I remember everything. And from my perspective, then I didn't. I don't know. I didn't see any connections, and the glove don't fit. Got to quit, right? To Johnny Cochran said.
Yeah, kind of like
Glove
Johnny
don't fit,
Cochran,
you
the
must
DA
quit.
did for OJ.
And so I never really took a stance that he was guilty or associated with it. So I was kind of but you got to remember now, for me at that time, OJ Simpson was in the likes of Walter Payton, and I mean, I was into football. This guy was the juice. I loved him in Airplane, not Airplane, the other
Naked Gun.
Naked Gun and things like that. And so I just had this kind of perception of him that I had a hard time dealing or accepting that he was involved with these murders. So, as a young high school student, I just figured he was being trumped up and they're trying to take his money and all that good stuff. Now, over time, as different things have come out, I've watched some character over time, at least according to the media, and beginning to hear his connections to different people since his time in Buffalo, and his connection to drugs and the mafia and things like that. I have completely turned and figured that this man was definitely a part of this, and he had somebody else with him, and yeah, he got off, and then his life afterwards has just been was a kind of a spiral from the consequences of being connected to people that are foolish and evil. So that's, and what am I taking that from? I'm taking that from not ever meeting him personally, but reading all the smoke that's connected to him. Things that come out from his trial, different articles, different things he said, things he's posted on Twitter, different stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you start finding, man, where there is smoke, there's fire, and birds of feather flock together. That whole thing is kind of, this guy's character just, to me, really had some stuff. I mean, like, I don't know. So time tells you, right? Over time, you start to see that this guy has got some deep connections to some pretty bad people. And when that happens, Wicked is right around the corner.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to let folks know that we're not live at this point, but sometimes you guys do the most commenting when we're not live because you don't want us to see it, because you know that when we see it, we're going to make a comment on it. But no, nonetheless, the comment section is on today. I want to let you guys know that you feel free to make as many comments, especially in this section, if there's memories that you have of O.J. Simpson, things that you've heard about O.J. Simpson, perceptions that you have, and I'll kind of dive into that discussion, Jason. I remember I was watching a Lakers game. I forget who they were playing, but it was the Lakers in the finals. It may have been the Detroit Pistons. But I think it may have been the Bulls.
Probably was the Bulls. It was 93. That's a good guess.
Yeah, I think the Lakers were getting beat. But nonetheless, I think the audio is still picking up. We might have a little bit of lag here, just because, hotels and stuff. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you good.
Okay, yeah, so the audio will still pick up here. This will be great for the podcast. But nonetheless, I remember watching the game, and then the game was interrupted by this white Bronco chase. Right. And it was saying that the police are chasing O.J. Simpson. And I'm like, what is going on here? First of all, put the game back on, because this is a critical moment in the game. Second of all, as I'm watching this Bronco, why are they chasing him? Why don't they just pull him over? He's driving 10 miles an hour. And he's got the whole state of California chasing after him. And so, Jason, I literally remember being so confused watching this because I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? Is this... I remember thinking that there's something that's got to be out of place here. There's got to be some disbelief. Something is going on here that is out of the ordinary, because I would think if somebody had done something wrong and you're the police and you're chasing him, just pull him over, arrest him, do whatever it is that you do so we can get the game back home. Little did I know how deep, how wide, how long the segment, as you were talking about, Jason, time does tell a story. This O.J. Simpson story would become. And so, like yourself, I began watching things, and I will admit to you, like you said, I believe the whole thing was a farce.
Yeah.
There's no possible way that that lovable, likable, athletic, handsome black man has done this crime that they're accusing him of. There's no way. He was, you were comparing him to Walter Payton. He was Walter Payton. He was Bill Cosby. He was a lot of different things. And that's a whole nother episode just to even talk.
Because there's levels to that one in there.
Yeah. There's a lot there for that. But he was all of those things, Jason. And I'm initially thinking, okay, they've made this up. Someone else has tried to frame him. Someone else has committed the crime. And, Johnny Cochran and the DA, right? This all-star team.
Yeah.
I begin to think to myself, well, with the information that they're presenting, is this a case where one needs to hire an all-star team to be able to be absolved of guilt, and that this is a just and right decision? And the more and more I begin to study and look into it, Jason, the more and more I begin to be a little bit suspicious.
Yeah.
The more suspicious I became that maybe he could have done this. Maybe the crime that was taking place here was the ability of the defense lawyers to obscure information. Wouldn't be the first time that that's ever happened.
Yeah, right.
But then, Jason, when the verdict came out, and here's where it gets interesting. You still with me?
Yep.
It got interesting to me because from the standpoint of the black community, there was almost this universal celebration. And I can't say that this was everybody everywhere at all times. I'm not speaking for everybody, but there was this sense in which the scales of justice have been tipped against the black man for so long. Finally, we get our day in court. But I'm going to be honest with you, Jason. Even at that time, as I saw black people celebrating, courtroom scene, a lot of scenes that were around there, people excited to hear the verdict, not guilty, I began to think this felt like a makeup call. You know what I'm talking about as an athlete.
Yeah.
Where the referee makes a really horrendous call and the fans are on edge because they're like, you know what? You just cost us the game because of that bad call. But then the referee comes back down and makes a call that is equally as bad against the other team. So neither team has justification to say the referee stole this game. No, you got that bad call. We got this bad call. Let's play on. And it felt like there have been a lot of bad calls in American history with regards to black people, black and brown people. This was the makeup call. He may have actually done this, but we're gonna let him go free this time. And this supposedly should make up for some of those other times when, well, you actually were innocent, but we charged you guilty. And so I began to have an uneasy sense about what was going to happen. And I don't know if this filters into a larger discussion that you want to have, but it's sad for me on three accounts. Because as the retrial happened and as the verdict of the civil decision was made, that all began to make sense to me that, yes, he did do it, but he can't be tried for that crime again and go to jail for the murders. That was a weird justice thing that I learned. Okay. And then the thing with him breaking in and stealing paraphernalia and all of those different things. I'm just like, man, this guy, he's going to, he escaped the fire and into the flame.
Yeah.
He got himself out of jail for star attorneys and star lawyers, but he was actually guilty. He avoided going to jail because it was just a civil suit and he had to pay some money. He didn't pay it. So he really got away. But then after this nonsensical theft thing in Las Vegas, I'm thinking he really didn't get away. He's still going to go to jail. And then on and on and on, when you begin to hear about his character, you're like, man, dude should have been in justice, in jail. And according to the way that, I guess, Christians have historically seen actual justice for crimes that have been committed, especially murder, he should receive the death penalty.
Mm.
And so this is a sad tale for several different reasons, but I'll stop at this point and see if there's any people who have any comments. Try to get my screen unfrozen and then listen to what it is that you have to say.
Well, this has a lot of the dynamics that you would think would make maybe the black community really on edge in a sense. Because if you think about it, Erskine, you have a star African-American athlete, and this guy is perceived as a model citizen for, I mean, not just the black community, but for America in general. He is, like you said, he's kind of the Walter Payton and Bill Cosby put together, and he's all over the TV. He's all over America's living rooms, and he's in commercials, and so he's really, really looked up. And then you have this thing where the other element to this is that you have this black guy, the optics of a black guy appealing to white people, right? And that's always been a bad picture in America, right?
Yeah.
So you have this guy now, and you have, and she's as white as white gets, blonde hair, blue eyes. She's the model of that, and here you have him. So as someone in the black community looking at this, you're thinking, oh, this guy's done. This guy's done. And then you get the verdict where he's not. And so what makes it interesting from this vantage point is 30 years later, I'm convinced the guy was guilty. And it's at the time when I thought he was not guilty, I didn't even really think about the race thing. I just thought this was O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
Now looking at it 30 years later, you can see where people were like, "Oh man, thank God he got he got out of this," because he was just assumed he was guilty because of the optics and what was going on. It's such a weird, all those things are playing into this, and I'm more aware of it now than I was then. I was it's so funny because I was so oblivious to the racial aspect of this at that time, or how deep it was. I knew there was some racial things because Rodney King was what, 91? Is that 90, something like that? So you had massive disruption with that, and then O.J. Simpson on trial in 93 that goes on forever. And so even with Rodney King in 91, I was not putting the dots together on how deep the racial implications can go in the community. So now I see it. I'm like, oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Makes sense. So It's just learning, growing, and getting more information out and watching character over time. That's the big thing. Something I feel like we are lacking right now as a nation is a solid character, and it's maybe more in my eyes now than it ever has been. And so as I begin to watch things unfold and begin to hear more, I'm like, man, there's a deficit of character here, and it's just showing in all of his decisions. And so,
yeah, Jason, let me just speak to the race thing for just a second. I actually wrote down some notes today. It's written in the fleshy tablets of my heart, but I actually wrote down a couple of things that I think, since we're doing this show, since we have a show that we can vocalize some things. Obviously, these are our opinions, and we want to present things in such a way that it causes you to think, and hopefully causes you to have a better opportunity to dialogue. Maybe we give you some vocabulary, maybe we give you some tools, maybe we give you some depth to your bag that you can go into and you can have some of these conversations. Well, Jason said, well, Erskine said, and maybe although I don't agree with what they said or how they said it or what the conclusion was, I would add to the conversation this. And so, Jason, I think we do a important service to those who watch this show or perhaps come across this show by providing points of conversation that is sometimes what people are thinking but won't say, or things that people have not heard before actually said, so that they can begin thinking. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you.
So here's why I think this is a sad commentary from the vantage point of race. So much discussion in our conversation, national conversation, is about race. We would say ethnicity, but I understand how people can be confused if you're using ethnicity and they're not understand what you're saying. So much has been said in our country. I would prefer ethnicity, but let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, about race. So much has been said with regards to O.J. Simpson, the race, like you talked about. Here's this black man, Ron Goldman, his wife, as white as they can possibly be. I'm going back and seeing these photos from 30 years ago, and they are beyond white. They are like Casper the Friendly Ghost. They are white, and he is black.
You don't even flash.
Hey, exactly. Don't put the flash on. They might get obscured in the flash. They are white. So you're looking at the optics of this after Rodney King decisions that have been made. You're thinking, man, O.J. Simpson, he's going down. He is going down in this scenario. And there felt like there was this against the power, against the man. Can O.J. Simpson pull us through one more time?
That's right.
And
bring it home.
For a lot of black people, and not everybody. Some people don't even care about football. They don't care about Naked Gun. They don't care about Hurts or whatever endorsements that he had. But for a lot of people in the community, to see someone who was athletically successful, in the entertainment industry successful, to see somebody who had credibility, he was on doing broadcasts. He kind of opened up that franchise of people who could use their personality after sports to be able to make a very nice living for themselves.
He broke.
Here's somebody who becomes a model for the black community of success, continued success, and continued relevance long after they finish playing. So he's using the football to get himself Hall of Fame, credentials, credits, commercials, endorsements, and he's got the thing going. I will say that there's a sad commentary, and you want to look right at the screen and say that there's a sad commentary to every athlete who has achieved any measure of fame. There's a sad cautionary tale here that thing which God has given you and the ability that he's given you and the connections and the relationships that he's given you to be able to make and build a successful life can become that thing that destroys you. How many athletes have we heard? And listen, I know we live in a fallen world, so we're not going to bat 1,000 on this. But when you begin to get underneath the surface, Jason, you begin to realize that those athletes, although they had been supremely blessed, and although they would have a unique ability to speak into the black community, speak into the disenfranchised, speak into, the underdog, so to speak, they instead abuse that power and abuse that position and do horrible things. It's just so sad that O.J. Simpson was not what we thought he was. And I think about that from the other side of that, mixed with your comments, Jason, about character. What if he had been what we thought he was? I'll take the positive slant of that.
Right.
What if he had been the type of person who could rise up, use his endorsements, then begin to go into some of these communities, be a poster child, be somebody that's a spokesman, be somebody that could point the way to other people, be somebody that could, he's married to a white lady, be somebody that could bring communities together, show the picture and the image of a family. What if he had been that?
Yeah.
What if he had been that?
And do you feel like this is this seems, I don't put this, there seems to be an overcast of this, because there are some phenomenal black leaders who I look like Thomas Sowell, I'm pronounce his name right, the economist.
Thomas Sowell, yes.
This guy is brilliant, and if he ran for president, he would have my vote. Like, you ever just sit down and listen to his interviews and listen to the common sense this guy has? He's remarkable, right?
YouTube algorithm has figured out that I need to listen to Thomas Sowell all the time. That's the videos that pop up.
Dude, so he is somebody who I look at in the black community and say, that guy right there. I have not come across any demerits, any kind of derogatory things in his life. It seems to be a consistent narrative to what he's doing, to how he's talking, and yet he's overcasted by the likes of these guys who seem to have shady character. O.J. Simpson. Do you remember when? I don't know if you remember this or not. I just remember this is a sticking point for me. I was a big fan of Michael Irvin and the Dallas Cowboys. I love watching.
Man, you're supposed to be a Bears fan. What's going on?
Yeah, I know, but so here's my problem. I'm a Bears fan, but because we suck so bad, I've got to find mistresses around the football.
Dang.
We
had to admit that.
Yeah, I know. Michael Irvin
on an international broadcast. We're both Bears fans, by the way.
Michael Irvin was.
Leave your jokes out of the comment section.
I love to watch play football, and I remember my friend had a big poster of him on his wall that says "Don't do drugs," and then Michael Irvin, comes out. And I remember
the White House.
As an athlete, thinking, "Oh my gosh." Here he's on a poster saying "Don't do drugs," and you've got this come up. You have in the music industry right now. You have P. Diddy under a lot of scrutiny, and names like Quincy Jones are being dropped, and Will Smith's stuff's being out there. So you have these guys.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Neverland.
You have these guys who are kind of got these reputations behind them that are not quite lining up to having the kind of character we want our young men to follow, and the likes of Thomas Sowell is being overcasted. Now, listen, this isn't limited to the black community. Good gracious.
Sure.
The white community's got doubly as bad, if you want to put it that way. I'm just saying, is in this side of the context of this conversation, I can look at OJ and say, man, I really wish you were the guy that you presented yourself to be, because that would have been really cool for a lot, not just the black community, but for America in general, like you said. And I wish also that Thomas Sowell and the likes of him would be lifted up a lot higher, because that guy's worth listening to.
Sure. And many people who have done some incredible things throughout history.
Right.
What's interesting, Jason, is that people want to sometimes have the conversation about Martin Luther King. Was he saved? He was a womanizer, and like bring out the bad things about Martin Luther King. Okay, so if you took Martin Luther King out of it, which obviously you couldn't in American history, but if you took Martin Luther King out of it, there's still some other incredible people: Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois. And you go down the list of people who, okay, let's talk about them. And so I just think it's difficult because as a national storyline, we have sometimes held, and this is, I guess this is my point. It took me a long time to say this. We will hold on to a figure like O.J. Simpson. He must be innocent. He must go free. We must make him what people think he is, because we have no one else in the black community that is lifting the prominence of the stature of black Americans. And I don't mean like no one else, but when these figures begin to loom so large, it makes it seem like, to your point, Jason, man, there's not a lot of people. It was a conversation that I had a few weeks ago, and I talked about it on my show with Shayna Rattler this last week, of a guy in Michigan who came up to my table. He overheard me. He didn't know who I was, complete stranger. And he came up and he said, I'm just listening to you talk. I was on the phone with somebody. He's like, it was just so incredible to hear you talk. And he said, I'm not trying to be racist. And I said, but you're about to say something racist, aren't you?
No, I'm about to say something.
He said, I'm really not racist. And I please don't, I hope this doesn't come across as racist. And I was like, but you're about to say racist stuff. So just go ahead and say it.
Are you in
and
Michigan?
His comment was, do what?
Were you in Michigan?
Yeah, I was in Michigan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so his comment was, look, maybe I'm just not around the right or different types of people, but I just don't hear blacks talk the way that you talk. I don't hear blacks. And I think that it was maybe in 3 categories in which I cut him off before he could finish saying what it was he was saying. I wasn't trying to be rude, but it was kind of like the theological prowess, the verbal articulation, conservative values. It's kind of how he was couching that. They're just blacks don't talk this way. Blacks don't. I'm like, hey. To your point, Jason, you're in Michigan. Your sample size has got to be quite small.
I was about to say, right? Unless you're in, not even Deerfield. I mean, unless you're in Detroit, maybe. But I like the further north.
You're not in Detroit.
Yeah.
And I had to cut him off. But I really thanked him for asking the question, because I really believe there's a lot of people who have that question or that observation in mind, but they're not going to say anything about it. Right? They're not going to go up to a complete stranger that they don't know and be like, man, you're black. And like, man, do black people talk? It's such an awkward thing. But I invite these conversations just because the Lord has always sort of used me in that regard. Complete strangers come up to me and Jason and tell me stuff when I'm traveling.
I know. You invite whether you want it or not. Like,
you're telling me really personal stuff right now. We haven't even introduced ourselves. Like I don't even know your name.
I have seen
We're on level
firsthand.
3 already.
I know. I've seen it firsthand.
Yes.
Whether you want it or not, it just comes. So there it is.
It will come. It will come. So I've embraced it now. If you want to ask if you can touch my hair, if you want to ask,
oh my gosh.
all the questions that I know that I'm likely to get if I'm traveling and around anybody. If you want to stare, you want to pull back because you're not quite sure what I'm going to do. All the things, brother.
Oh my
all
gosh.
the things. I'm just saying, in this conversation, because the media, because people are presenting such a small sample size of what passes for success, when that person that has been lifted up, and listen, none of us are perfect, but when that person has been lifted up, is so different than what we thought he was. What Tiger Woods, right?
Yeah.
The disappointment is not that there can be a rich golfer who is involved in extramarital things, duplicitous. Look, that happens all the time. but what we had built Tiger Woods up to be and what his position was in the black community was one of epic. He's on the Mount Rushmore. Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Tiger Woods, Aretha Franklin. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know who would be on that Mount Rushmore, but those are some very large figures. And when they're not what we had thought, that Bill Cosby, it is disappointing. But here's something that I learned, Jason, and began to feel a certain way yesterday. I'm on the battlefield at Gettysburg, and I'm on the Confederate side as we're kind of looking at and prepping the scene on day 3 for Pickett's charge, which really wasn't Pickett's charge, but we'll do American history some other time. Wasn't only Pickett. And our tour guide took us to a place where there's a Tennessee monument to the Tennessee brigades that were there. It was the last monument that was placed at Gettysburg, and the state of Tennessee didn't want to pay for it. And so some other folks got together and they put a monument there because they were there at the Battle of Gettysburg. And our tour guide made a comment about taking down historical monuments. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I began to think to myself, if you absolve yourself of all of the bad things that happen or the actual historical things that happen, how do you tell the complete story of anything?
Right.
I would have, instead of tearing down the statues, maybe put up another statue beside it or some plaque beside it that tells a more comprehensive story.
Yeah.
So that we have both of those things being displayed because they're both realities that people experienced in American history. I think, and here's my point, Jason, if we're going to tell the story, we're all about Black history. I had Joel Freeman on my show this last week, Black History 365, the comprehensive history of Black people in the Americas. Comprehensive history. They've done their research on this project. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But if we're going to tell the complete story, which we're always trying to get, more Black history. We need America to care more about Black history. If we were to get the complete story out there, there would be the Thomas Sowells and the O.J. Simpsons that are out there. Are we good with that?
Right.
Are we good with that? Because if we want to tell the story, we want to talk about all the laurels of Martin Luther King Jr., which we should. We can also talk about some of the negative things as well and just be honest about the story. If we want to talk about... Go ahead.
No, well, I mean, that's again, when you have a biblical worldview of humanity, right, of understanding total depravity, understanding we're fallen, that nobody's batting 1,000 in leadership, then this makes sense inside that worldview. Of course, there's going to be flaws. Now, we don't want our leaders to have major character flaws. I think that's what's such a disappointment about O.J. Simpson, is that he was put up on this guy who represented a certain kind of character and morality that just wasn't there. It was completely, seems like it was deficit. But when we have, if we understand humanity and the grace of God, then don't we have the room to tell the whole story? Can we say, hey, look, this is the person right here? Because the grace of God allows us to have that. I mean, if you start doing the history on me, you're going to find that I'm not as consistent as I want to be or I like to be. And
right.
Heaven knows my church probably hears about it every Sunday before communion. Hey, look, this is where I dropped the ball. But the meta narrative of my life, the whole narrative of my life is going to be that I live to try to make much of Jesus in church community home. That's what was my goal. This is where I fell short, but this is where God used me and made me accomplish good things. Isn't it because we have this deficit of this biblical worldview that we can't view our leaders to the same
yes.
thing? I mean,
yes.
Black community, white community, that kind of thing.
And that's why, friends who are watching this show today, that's why we do this show. We don't do this show so that we can come across as perfect people. We come across so that you'll be thinking about whatever story we do, a biblical lens and a biblical worldview that says, let's tell the story, God's story, and how we find ourselves in that story. And the way that we get into God's story is through his electing love, through the grace of God. So what we would, if we were just telling the American story or the contemporary story, what we would be able to say, you know what, Jason, you and I, we do a lot of things for our community, and so let's give ourselves a pat on the back. Let's say that we do more than other people do, and now we can consider ourselves better than other people. Well, that's not the story that we can tell. That's not the biblical story. That's not the biblical worldview. Jason, you and I have pretty intact families. You know, some of our relatives don't have such a good family history. But you and I, brother, we've done a good job loving our wives and trying to take care of our kids and responsibilities that are there. Man, those other jokers in our family, we're a little bit better than they are. No. As a follower of Jesus Christ, we can't tell that story. The only story that Jason is referring to that we can tell is the story of God's redemptive love and God's grace. He brought us into a story that we did not work for, we did not earn, we did not merit it in any way. And so now, as a result of that, what now do we do with the incredible, amazing grace of God? This podcast is a derivative of that. Any place where we start, whether the story be P. Diddy, whether the story be O.J. Simpson, whether the story be Donald Trump, whatever the story is, we're going to one particular focus, and that is the grace of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And the kingdom of God and the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're gonna keep striking that drum, because that is the story. That is the thought behind why we're talking about O.J. Simpson. So that we can tell God's story.
Right.
And what is unfortunate is that there was more that came out in his story that was more about his story of depravity than the story of God's grace.
Right. And the thing through the lens of what you talked there, that the grace of God, we can actually give a complete story, a fuller story of the person, and then actually take the lessons and learn. Because and what little I know of O.J. Simpson, only through what I've watched on the media over 30 years and read about him, I did not see any kind of redemption. I didn't see his turning to Christ or anything like that. So I don't know anything about that. What I do know, though, is that God makes all things right, and that he stood before, when he died, he stood before the Lord. And my hope is at some point in his life, he turned and repented and gave his life to Jesus. But what I can tell you this is, regardless if he got off in 1994, justice will always be served in the end. Justice will always be served in the end. So that's again, that whole complete story that we want to give when we're looking at somebody's life. And for me, justice will be served for me, but thank God it was served on the cross. Right?
Come on, there you go. I knew you were going there, so I don't want to throw this last tidbit in just yet.
Yeah. So for me, by the way, if you were to examine my heart and my mind, I'm just as depraved as O.J. Simpson. If you were to put my life on display, you would see that we actually are a lot closer than you think. The only redemption of me is that Jesus Christ has not only atoned for my sin, but has empowered me to begin to lift my eyes up to see where my help comes from, and to see that his sanctifying work over time. And so that is a better story, I think the world needs to hear. And so, I'm with you. I hear you.
I got to ask you a question though, Jason, before we do our final summary. Because I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know what your answer is here, but I'm really curious to know. Folks, jump in the comment section and let us know what you think about this conversation. Keep it going. But Jason, I'm really curious to know this. When the verdict came out, and there were perhaps I'm thinking more about the second verdict, the civil trial, in which there were a lot of people that kind of knew that O.J. Simpson was guilty, but now was actually confirmed. Now, he can't be imprisoned or, all those different things. But when the civil trial came out, do you think that kind of verdict fueled some of the white animosity toward black people in this country? And I know that's a large question to overspeak everything. But I feel like, and here's why I'm asking the question, I feel like in the current climate, the diversity, equity, and inclusion feels like black people are trying to get one over on white people. And white people are responding and going, what the heck is this? Like, how all of a sudden are we criminals? We hadn't even done anything. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And it's such a violent overreaction that I think it kind of fuels into this black people trying to get away with stuff. Black people trying to manipulate the system. Black people trying to, and it just kind of feels cringy in a weird sort of justice way. Do you think, since this is an opinion show, do you think that white people feel like being reminded of O.J. Simpson is a slap in their face? A slap in your face.
Oh man, I don't know.
Is he frozen?
Yeah, I don't know because
Speak for all white people everywhere.
all right, I don't know. I don't know if only until recently do I start to look at it like this. Had OJ been tried during this time, I would probably think that. You understand? Like if he was, if this was going on in 2020, 2024, I would probably be like, yeah, he's just, he's gonna get off because black people are getting one over the white people. When I looked at that civil trial, I was like, how can he be not guilty of murder and then guilty of murder at the same time? To me, I looked at the justice system as really screwed up. Like, how's this work?
Okay.
How can he be found not guilty at his criminal trial and then found guilty at his civil trial? If he's not guilty, he's not guilty, right?
Uh-huh.
So how is this going on? And I began to look at it as something's wrong with our justice system. Now, looking at it from today, maybe a little older, a little wiser. I just see him as guilty. Like he was guilty, and somehow or another, I guess God worked it out with the civil trial. I have no idea. But I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe it's a better question to ask somebody else who I don't personally feel like.
Well, you were talking about, yeah. And I guess the part that I pick up on is you were talking about, had this trial happened in 2020, or this was a contemporary trial, maybe it feels a certain way. Don't you think
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, that when this trial is brought back up in today's, like it had gone away. Nobody's talking about O.J. Simpson. Nobody's talking about this trial.
Yeah.
But because he dies, now this has been brought back up, and now for whatever the media coverage of this is, there's a new audience that now is reintroduced to this. There's a new audience that's kind of looking at his life and making some summary statements about his life that maybe obviously wasn't there when the verdict was given. Verdicts were given. 3 or 4 verdicts were given. So now they're brought into this discussion, and now they're seeing it and experiencing it through the lens of 2024. Do you think that hurts? And I guess that's my overall question. Do you think this story at this time, knowing what the details of the story are, hurts the national conversation with regards to ethnicity and diversity?
Well, I guess my thought is OJ really that relevant?
Okay.
To have that kind of impact, I don't know. I mean, he was relevant for us, but I'm not sure if he's that relevant for the newer culture who's looking into this. I think they would just assume, through the lens of their diversity, equity, inclusion, that he was just another victim of the system. But
victim of the system, yeah.
I don't know, because there's so much that's come out that this guy's got so many demons in his closet. I don't know if he's just one of those examples of like, no matter how we skin this cat, we can't make this guy better than he is. You know, I'm trying to, you know, he's got so much going on there that you're just like, no matter how you look at, whatever the angle we look at this, we're seeing this is not good. I don't know if he's got enough relevancy to make that work in the discussion. I don't know. Again, had this been maybe somebody else who's a little more relevant, I can maybe see it. Maybe we should pull some other white guy in the conversation and ask him, because maybe I'm deficient here.
Well, maybe there will be some other white people in the comment section that will join the discussion. But I think one of the diagnostics that I would ask to maybe get at the answer to that question is, how would you feel, Jason, white person, and white people, if some of the leading voices in the diversity, equity, and inclusion came out and said, we're really disappointed that the life of O.J. Simpson did not measure up to the ideals of what it is that we're striving for? How would you feel if the guys and gals that are out there being the most vocal of and critical of white people came back and said, wait a minute, whoa. Let's just raise some just scales here and just say what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. O.J. Simpson does not meet that standard in terms of his character and his life. And so let us be clear that although he may have done some good things, we are not trying to produce a system that produces more O.J. Simpson. Do you think that would go a long way?
I think it would go
a
lot.
Be a bomb of some sort?
Yeah, I think that would be a great statement. I think that would give some credibility, maybe some legitimacy. That, hey, we're looking at a higher standard of character here. We want our role models and our leaders to be people who are someone we can model, like the Sewells of the world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be applauded. I would hope it'd be applauded. Anyways,
it would not be applauded, but
yeah, I know, because you're. Well, actually, I almost think it's. I just can't hear that coming out of that side narrative. I don't. What I hear,
and that to me is the big mark of the disingenuousness of Black Lives Matter and some of these diversity groups that are out there, is that there's a lot of pressure for white people to change the system, to upend things, to redress historical evils of character and commission.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of that on the other side. There's not a lot of that willingness to say, you know what, and to the people who have committed crimes and the people who have lacked character, we also are concerned about them, because that doesn't meet the ideal of what it is that we're striving for.
Right.
If there was that kind of conversation that was going on, I feel like our whole national conversation would be different.
It would be more productive.
It would actually be productive.
It would be way more productive.
Let's give our final takeaways. It's the way forward. And Jason, I'm gonna go first.
Government officials insist
Well, folks, if you've watched the show this long, then you have nothing to do on Saturdays. But no, there's people who watch this show all throughout the week, and we do appreciate you guys' comments, even after you've watched the show and it's a few days past the show. We always love hearing from you guys, because if you've watched the show any number of times, you recognize we're saying the same thing over and over and over. And the careful and consistent restatement of the truth, I believe, will set us free. And so on this show, the way forward for the church, as we continue to strike the melodious note of the gospel, is to tell people that there's none of us who are good. There's none of us that are righteous. There's none of us who, if not given fame and popularity and opportunity and athleticism, would not find ourselves perhaps in the same situation as O.J. Simpson. But for the grace of God, there go I. And so when viewing O.J. Simpson's situation in the light of the gospel, we recognize what incredible grace has been given to us, and as a result of that, what incredible opportunity we now have to take the momentary speck of life that we have here, the vapor, as James would call it, and to do the things that advance the kingdom of God. There is ultimately in the horizon the win over death, the sting of death, and the things that have gone wrong in this world. And we could spend all of the show talking about all of the evil that's out there, but if we never got to the hope of the gospel, then we've never completed the story. And so I want to again complete the story of God's gracious and amazing plan, the supremacy of Christ, the kingdom of God, and what it is that we get an opportunity to live for. Right now counts for eternity. And so I hope even if you're watching this show today, and this is the first time that you've watched the show, you recognize that from O.J. Simpson to the cross, from the cross to consummation, and to eternity, there is hope in none other than Jesus Christ.
When I look at O.J. Simpson's life, God has gifted this man with athleticism and charisma, and there was a time in his life when he worked hard. He made himself one of those men who could be admired on the football field. He could be admired in his life as an entertainer, and he broke through grounds when he was able to take, like you said earlier, when he was able to start looking at the endorsement side of things, the post-football life, and how he began to manage himself. And he was able to build an image for himself that the American public could grab a hold of and buy into. And it was really cool in that regard, because here you have this man, especially with our history, who was not supposed to be that. And yet he is, and he was well loved and adored. But the whole thing was a facade, because at the same time that he was building this image for himself, there was a deficit happening where he was starting to associate himself with people who would eventually come to his ruin. And this is what Jesus talks about, the whitewashed tomb thing. On the outside, you look one way, on the inside, you look another way. This is not subject to just O.J. Simpson. This is all of our problem. We can create an image for ourselves. We can be this one thing, but if our character is not lining up with the gospel, if Jesus is not empowering us to walk in the kingdom life now, then all of us find ourselves in O.J. Simpson's position. Maybe not the level he was at because of his notoriety, but it doesn't matter. We all find up the same consequence. It's appointed for man to die once, and we face judgment. When God begins to examine your life, and just because your image looks one way, he's looking at your heart. And somewhere in OJ's life, he never seemed to make that connection. And so as much as we can use the lens of grace to look at somebody's life and say, hey, look, you know what? There's some really wonderful things this man did, but there's obviously some deficits. At the end of the day, the one thing that matters is when he stands before the Lord. And that's what I need to make myself aware of is, on the one hand, I am O.J. Simpson. I'm no different than he is in that way. The only thing that separates me from him is that Jesus Christ has done something remarkable for me, and that and he changed my heart, he changed my mind, he changed the way I look at life, he changed everything. And so the only reason why I don't succumb to the depravity is because of the grace of God. And so I would just commend the church to, one, always remember that has to be a part of our lens, that like Erskine, you said, but by the grace of God, there go I. I am O.J. Simpson in that regard. And then the second thing is to look at is that the worldview, the gospel worldview, gives us the correct lens to begin to make assessments of people's lives, so to speak, as we start to see the trajectory of everything. And we start to see here's the grace of God. Here's where this failure happened, and this is what we can learn from it. We don't want to put all of our eggs in the image that's put out there, because I think a lot of people were disappointed when that image was busted. And we realized that this man was not the man we thought he was. But at the same time, we cannot just focus on all of his deficits either, because then there's an arrogance there that says, oh, well, I'm much better, or my family is much better. Again, the gospel provides the lens for us to look at the life, to see the grace of God and discern wisdom, and how we can avoid those traps at the same time, give God the glory and the honor he deserves, and live the good life now, and point people to Jesus Christ, which is what I would have rather seen O.J. Simpson do than to point people to himself. But so the church needs, I think, to have that lens, the gospel lens, to view these characters that come up in our life, like O.J. Simpson. So that's what I see.
Praise the Lord. Awesome. I don't have my sound effects today, or I'd be playing some sound effects, but I will give you this. So nonetheless, we'll close the book on this one with everyone who passes along to their eternal reward. There's nothing more that they can do about it. But
Yep.
you and I, the Lord has given us opportunity. We can do something about it right now. It's the Way Forward Show. See you guys next week.
Government officials